Hola amigos de Wine News TV, les invito a conectar conmigo y con mis invitados en Wine News TV On The Go, un podcast que a su vez es un espacio donde aprenderás sobre el mágico mundo del vino a través de invitados de todas partes del mundo que nos contarán sobre sus proyectos para obsequiarnos de forma embotellada música, fuego y leones, como decía el gran maestro argentino Jorge Luis Borges en su poema Soneto al Vino. Hola amigos de Wine News TV Puerto Rico, estoy aquí en Fox Run Vineyards en los Finger Lakes en Seneca Lake con el señor Bob Madill del Wine and Grape Foundation del estado de Nueva York. Estamos aquí gracias a Scott y Ruth Osborne en Fox Run Vineyards. Vamos a hablar del estado de Nueva York, sus vinos, de Seneca, de los Finger Lakes. Y vamos a hablar de dos vinos deliciosos, dos varietales que se dan muy bien aquí, el Riesling en blanco y el Lemberger. Escuchen bien, el Lemberger en los tintos con Bob. Bob, how are you, my friend? All good?
I'm doing well, thank you, Eduardo.
Thank you for making it all the way here in this cold. How cold is this for you?
Cold.
Not cold for
No,
you.
it's not
Very cold for my Caribbean bones.
Well, your Caribbean bones are going to get colder in the next few days.
Tell me a little bit about you, the man, the person behind the position, because obviously you have you have a name. A lot of people said that I needed to meet you because not only you know everybody, but because you represent the wines of New York and you have a trajectory. But I want to hear about the man behind the position. You're Canadian. You told me off camera that you were born there. And I just want to understand when you were growing up, were you exposed to wine through your parents? How did it all come to be?
My parents drank pretty awful wine.
Pretty awful wine, okay.
Wine. They would buy these large gallon jugs from the Quebec Monopoly, Société des Alcools de Québec, and you know when a gallon is half empty, it's not so good.
Exactly.
So I would ask my mother, "Why do you drink this stuff?" And she'd say, "Well, some wine is better than no wine." And I think
there's
that's what she
said. There's a lot of intellectuality in that.
So I sort of have that same idea. Sometimes some wine is better than no wine. Anyway, when I was a young man, I was in one of the stores owned by the liquor monopoly in downtown Montreal. I had this bottle of wine in my hand. I think it was French. It had gold writing on it. Looked very fancy. And I had no idea why I was buying the wine. And I said to myself, standing there at 18 years old, that's going to change. And that's when my interest in wine started, right there.
That's amazing. And do you recall which grape, Bordeaux? You said Bordeaux.
I think it was a Bordeaux. It would have been a blend of some kind, Eduardo, but I don't remember what it was.
Did something move inside of you? Did you feel, oh, there's more than alcoholic beverage here? There's a sense of place. There's a trajectory, a history that did wine. I am sure that before that you had a beer. Have you had a beer before that?
I didn't particularly, and still don't drink much beer. I drank beer when I was on construction jobs, but that was about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that first wine, was that the wine that, and maybe you don't have a wine such as that, but for a lot of people, and it was my case with the wine from the Priorat in Spain, that was a parting of the waters of sorts, to put it in a very fancy term, if you will, but a before and an after. Was that the wine for you that told you, the inner Bob, there's something here?
It made me curious.
Okay.
That's it. What it did is it aroused my curiosity about this beverage, its history, where it came from, what's the deal, what's the background. And so at that point, I just started reading, doing a little tasting, but mostly intellectually treating wine as a curiosity. Developing knowledge. It wasn't until maybe I was like very early 20s in Toronto, or no, in fact I wasn't, it was in Ottawa. And I was at a tasting that the same monopoly put on the SAQ of Bordeaux. So I went to this thing going, okay, Bordeaux, I'm going to find out Bordeaux. And it wasn't until that tasting that I realized how good red wine could be. And it was a Chateau Talbot 79 that
Chateau Talbot. Oh, I
Talbot,
love Chateau
and that was the
Talbot.
wine
Yeah.
that was, if it
Yeah.
was an epiphany, it was like, oh, this is
That's Saint
actually,
Estèphe,
this is
right?
good. I forget, Saint
Saint
Julien
Julien,
or
Saint
Saint
Julien,
Julien. Yeah.
Talbot is Saint Julien. It's gorgeous. It's left bank, predominantly Cabernet
Yeah.
Sauvignon. I had a Chateau. I was born 77. I had a Chateau Talbot 78, maybe 20 years ago. So it might have been the same vintage you had.
But anyway, then I became much more
Of course, you went crazy
engaged
for it.
with the hedonic aspects of it.
Okay,
Yeah.
the romantic aspect.
Well,
of
more
it.
I liked the taste. I
Okay.
didn't realize I liked the taste of these styles of wines. I just didn't know it.
But you had sort of a homecoming or a sort of debut with a very high end wine. Like not a lot of people at that tender age tend to drink Chateau Talbot. So
Remember, though, the milieu in which I was growing up and being exposed to wine was very international,
okay,
because Ontario and Quebec are some of the very biggest international importers of wine in the world. The markets are huge. It's all of Quebec, all of Ontario.
Canadians are very sophisticated. They've always been in a very advanced society. I have a lot of Canadian friends, and to me, Canadian is Europe put together with America, but with a dollop of New World into them.
And that's a very good way to put it. A dollop. For example, I don't think at that time we saw much of anything from South America, for example.
Of
And
course,
probably,
but no one saw
no.
South America at that time.
or from Australia.
South America came to be in the mid '90s
Yeah.
with Argentina.
Yeah, we were not exposed
Of course,
to those
of course.
wines.
So Bordeaux, and then you were 18, 20 years old. What came after that?
I was involved in the high-tech industry.
Okay.
And so my job took me to many different countries.
Okay.
Always I would add in a trip or time to see the vineyards.
I love that. So you made it a cause in your personal
That's
life
right.
aside. Like I've been doing that as a lawyer. Like hey, we have deposition, we have to contract review. Is there a winery nearby? Is there a
That's
wine
exactly,
region?
and that's
what you
exactly
did?
what I did. Yeah.
Can you recall those first couple of trips or travels?
I
that you
can,
did?
actually,
Okay.
yeah.
And where did you go, for example?
Well, the first major trip was to Holland,
Okay.
Enschede, where I was presenting a paper. And after that, I figured out how to get to Burgundy.
Oh my God.
I made some appointments, and I said, okay, I'm going to find out what Burgundy is a little bit about. It wasn't too hard because I could get on the train. And I went to Louis Latour. I went to Montmoussin. Met the Montmoussin.
Montmoussin, of course.
A couple of others. Not with any particular.
And you were in what, your mid-20s back then?
By then, I would have been in my mid to maybe 26 to 28, somewhere in there.
Oh Lord, you were trying Burgundy
Yeah.
when the Chinese craze had not started, when you could
Not even
buy
close.
the Domaine Drouin, the Louis Latour,
Yep.
the
Yep.
Masson Leroy.
Everything was basically affordable, even.
Exactly, but
I mean-
but after the 2000s, when the Chinese came into the World Trade Organization, it became crazy. Like
No,
totally
totally
bad
nuts.
mouthing the Chinese. I don't know if anybody from China listens to this podcast, but the prices like went nuts.
One of the wines that you had mentioned, or the region that you mentioned earlier, when we were just talking informally, was Rioja. We did see good reservas, Grand Reservas from Rioja, and I became a big fan of that style of wine.
The
Torres
Tempranillos from
and
the Tempranillos from there, they're very
Yeah.
graceful. They say that there are a couple of regions that are very similar when they age, like Piemonte, northern Italy, and close to Torino, in Alba, the land of Barolo, Old Rioja, mature Rioja, and mature Burgundy, because they have this sanguine mineral, like irony, this funkiness to them, this earthiness to them. This is fantastic. So you were exposed to high-end wines at affordable prices in Europe,
Yeah.
Burgundy, Rioja. You were making, your career, your profit in the sector, real estate and tech. Was it tech that you
Tech.
mentioned?
Tech.
Tech.
Yeah.
And then when did that lead you for something more formal with wine, if at any time?
I had a friend, and who was my employee at one of the companies I was running, um, Mike Como. And Mike was making wine on the side as an
Okay.
amateur.
Cuomo as in the New York
Como,
family.
French. No, he's a
Oh,
guy
Cuomo is from the,
from
okay, okay.
Nova Scotia.
The
Big,
Cuomos are the Italians from
yeah,
my, yeah,
not the same one.
not the same Cuomo.
Como, not
Como,
Como.
okay.
Anyway, so there's Mike making these pretty terrible wines, and I was interested in wine. I said, "Okay, the only thing that you're doing wrong, Mike, is you're not using good stuff."
Where was it he making it from?
In his
From
basement in Ottawa.
in Ottawa, okay.
Kits.
Canadian grapes.
Kits. No, not even Canadian kits or wine. It was just stuff. I don't know. Who knows? Chemistry. And so I got
Where
him.
was he sourcing the grapes from?
Oh, they would have been California, Italian,
okay.
Alicante.
Yeah, Alicante Bouchet.
Something
So he
like
was
that.
he was bringing the wines in, doing the fermenting at his basement, as
And
his garage.
A lot of people in Ottawa did that informally as
Right.
part of their culture. Well,
Uh-huh.
Mike was French Canadian.
This is the 70s, the 80s.
70s.
I'm loving this. I'm
70s.
loving this conversation. Okay.
So I got him going, and I said, "Okay, Mike, we're going to make a change. We're going to upscale the grapes that you're using." So we started buying fairly high-end specialty grapes from California. Chardonnay, Cabernet, Merlot, no Cabernet Franc, not very much Riesling, a lot of Chardonnay for the whites.
Lots of Chardonnay, of course.
So we started making...
Do you remember who you bought from?
Yes, there was a guy called Peter Brem who was an expert in small lot viticulture, where he would buy, and at the time Peter was getting some very high-end grapes from some high-end properties, and we weren't paying that much for them. And so you could make some very good, particularly white wines, make very, very good white wines. Red wines are a little more difficult because of the process.
Of course.
But anyway, we sort of went down that road. We did that for a few years, and then I said, okay, I want to kick it up. And so by this time, knew quite a few people around in the industry and so
What's
forth.
What's funny to me, Bob, pardon the interruption here, is that around the world of wine, there's always been a component of not only craziness, but aspirations, because you have a couple of young kids from Canada calling you. I want to buy grapes and ferment them in my garage. So the person in California receiving that message, obviously he or she was making a dime,
Oh, yeah.
but there was a component in his or her head saying, these are lunatics.
No, that guy had a business line right across Canada and the United States.
Okay.
Peter was very smart. Refrigerated trucks going everywhere.
Okay.
But he, as you might imagine, as the California wines became more popular internationally, everything started to change, because the places that we were getting the grapes became...
Well, this is post Judgment of Paris.
Oh, yeah. This is way post.
This is post the craze of California.
That's
as
right.
Yeah, of course.
That's right. Yeah.
But before that, it would have been different. Okay.
So I basically said, okay, what's the next evolution of this wheel? And so I was in contact with quite a few people in Niagara, and I ended up over a period of 15, almost 20 years, working in Niagara. And my career was such that I could moonlight.
You
At
could
that
what?
point, I could moonlight.
What's moonlight?
I could hold down 2 jobs.
Okay.
So by that time that I'm talking about, I was hired by Digital Equipment Corporation of Canada to do a specific job. I said, there's no problem. I can do this with one arm tied behind my back. I got all this other time. And I basically started in the profession of learning about wine, selling wine, making wine, and basically spending a lot of time in Niagara.
Okay. This is with your partner, your first partner.
No.
By yourself.
Oh, by myself. Yeah.
Okay.
Working for wineries, just doing all sorts of stuff. I said, I'm going to get in the business. I don't know how I'm going to get in the business. I have no idea how I'm going to make money at this, but I'm going to learn all about it. And that's what I did for more than a decade.
Was that a decision you made based because of a profit possibility of wine, or it was a passion of yours that you said, my time on this earth is limited and I want to do something that will create a cheer in my heart?
a little bit of that, but it was also a reaction to what I had experienced in the high tech industry, which I learned I did not at the end of it had a great career, glad I did it, and ended up not respecting what was going on in the industry.
Okay.
Did not appreciate the ethics that I was seeing. It wasn't a place I wanted to be part of anymore. It was just brutal. I said, okay, what else can I do? Well, I'm interested
Dog
in this.
eat dog world.
It was pretty grim.
And with wine, even more so here in the Finger Lakes, there's a camaraderie and there's this sense of if we all grow, we all get ahead. And even with high-end regions, and I've been traveling and doing content with well-established regions, there's this sense of we work with the land, we work with the soil, we travel, we represent our region, we represent a brand style, we represent the grape. There's this sense of, I don't know if the right word or term would be to honor where you come from, or if you honor a tradition of something that people have been doing for hundreds of years. But I've been doing wine content for about 18, 17 years now, interviews with people from all over the world. And there's this sense of I'm holding the fort for those who will come after me and from those who came before me. And very little do I see unhappy or people working in the wine trade, the wine industry, who hate their jobs. They're most likely love what they do. Did you recognize at that time that as you left this world where it was very nasty, that this other world was welcoming?
Yes. Also, that you could be an individual actor,
Okay.
and it's a tough business. The wine business is very difficult, but in the high tech, it is you're part of you're a small little wheel in a big gigantic machine, typically, right? And so you, as an individual actor, could use your own skills, your own knowledge, build up your base of experience, and have an independence. And I love that. And also, I love the subject matter. And by then, I was a passionate exploring everything I could about wine in different regions all over the world. And I just couldn't figure out how to get into it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did this working for other people because I'd been going down to the Finger Lakes for a while, until I met a guy who put me in touch with a young man at Cornell who was starting a project. And I said, okay, I'm going to find out about this. Subsequently, in the early, say mid-90s, I met this young guy, Greg Sandor, and he and I ended up starting a winery in the Finger Lakes.
What was the name of the winery?
Sheldrake Point.
Okay.
And so he and I were the principal actors. We subsequently met Chuck Tauk, who became the principal partner later in that year. But meanwhile, we'd already started planting and had the business up and running and off the ground. And that was sort of my footprint into all the entrepreneurial aspects of the business.
And what did you plant? Like what did you buy vineyards? Did you buy a property?
No, we started with an abandoned dairy farm. There was nothing. Hosmer was the nearest neighbor to our north. Lucas was the nearest neighbor to our south. There was no culture in that little area where we were on Sheldrake Point, Route 153, of anything to do with wine. And so we started from scratch, and we planted Riesling, we planted Gamay, we planted Cab Franc, we planted Chardonnay. 1997, 5 acres went in the ground. Boom, we're in the business.
And when did you first taste the first bottles, the first wines made from that effort? Like in
99.
99, 2
Yeah,
years
and in fact, it was Peter Bell who made the wine for us.
Okay.
Here,
Yeah.
Fox Run. Craig Hosbach is the winemaker now. Peter's retired, but I did some contracts. I basically contracted with Peter, my specifications, and Peter was a great guy, and we got along really well. Scott, of course, Peter and Scott were hugely supportive of Sheldrake, as they were any young winemaking business, because the ethic here is we're talking about is to support those who are
These are
trying.
fantastic people. Peter, he was cleaning the cellar. I was with my friend Tito, who's part Puerto Rican. And Peter, in 10 minutes, told me that I had very good English, that I had the passion of a Latin poet like Pablo Neruda, and that I had to keep at it because it's important to communicate wine with passion, much more so than with technicality or with snobbism. I hate the snobbish part of wine. I think I've done very well with the optics of the consumer. I am first and foremost, I'm a consumer, and I don't want to tell people how to make wine because the majority of my audience don't care for how you make wine, but rather how you enjoy and consume and buy wine. And he gifted me a Riesling that he made in 2001. He had a broom or a mop in one hand, and then he went to a box and he said, "You should drink this." And time again, I've encountered this same type of human being who's very generous, not only with his time, but with his work. You don't find many painters or sculptors who will go back to the end room of their workshop and gift you something. But this has happened to me in Spain, in Italy, and now here. Maybe they can read my face or read my passion, but I've been gifted wines that have been 10, 30, 40 years waiting for somebody to drink them. And that's, I don't know if it's like a little niche, a little club, a little something that we have wine lovers that, hey, this guy's going to enjoy what I did. And I was gifted a bottle of a Riesling 23 years old. And that's special to me. Are we talking about the same Peter?
You certainly are.
What a guy. What a
yeah,
guy.
yeah.
I want to invite him to my house in Puerto Rico. What a person. So, and how long were you making wine with him? For how
Oh,
long?
maybe 3 years, Eduardo, something like that, until we sort of got our own facility up and running. 2 or 3 years, 3 years, let's say 3 years. I can't remember exactly. Then we have had our own facility, and we're making our own wines and doing our own thing. And I was involved in that for 15, as the general manager and the wine grower for over 15 years. And it was a complicated business because of the structure of the company. And after that period of time, I said, okay, something's got to change. And I left. And my
Okay.
partner and I, then Chuck Doak, we separated, doing our own ways. And that sort of put me into the situation where I was free to do really what I wanted. And so I've done some independent consulting, done a whole bunch of
Let's
stuff.
go back to the time. Did you feel that in that time, did you make a life or did you make a profit?
We didn't make a profit. I made a life.
You made a life.
I made a good life. I had a lot of very, very positive experience. Well,
Good
but
memories, good memories.
yeah, I
from
mean,
those
but
times.
during the time that we've been talking, there's a word that's a French word, métier, and it gave me my métier, and I've never left it. That ability to understand the connection of all the things that you do to make wine, grow the grapes, start with the land and the soil and the circumstances, the sun, the rain, and so forth. You start there with very basic things, right? That can't change. You can't change that.
Of
Not
course.
much. You can change a little bit. And then you work from there. That's what you do. You work from there. And so I learned what my métier
And lots
was.
of heartbreaks, right? Lots of heartbreaks.
Oh, well, you're a farmer.
You know,
It's not convenient. People, when they're looking at a bottle of wine like these ones from Fox Run, the Riesling or the Lemberger, you don't think someone out there in the field.
was working his or her butt off.
Yeah, I believe that wine comes from the place. It's locationally specific. Location is the short word for everything that happens at a place. Everything
Yeah.
that happens at a place. Call it terroir. I don't really care, but it's It's from this place. And the best and the most interesting wines are from a place.
What's your relationship to the wines from the state of New York? And then afterwards, tell me a little bit about why Finger Lakes Seneca is so special in terms of winemaking and a terroir for good quality wines being produced here.
Well, I think you're 100% right when you talk about the story of a region. In the case of wine, it can't be, you can't be removed from the location that wine is made from. The grapes, they come from a place. Its geology has been formed in some way. Um, the seasons affected in some way. The cultural traditions affected in some way. And so I think in New York, we have several locations that have this property where there is distinction. So, for example, Long Island, a maritime climate, it's unmistakable. And the terroir with the lighter soils, the sandier soils, the geology there is very different than here. So the chemistry is very different than
Is
here.
that what I make Sparkle Point?
Sparkling Point, 100%.
Oh
Yes.
my God.
A French guy, crazy French guy.
Just spectacular
Yeah.
bubbles. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. No, those are very fine wines.
They are.
Yeah. And then you can move to another part of New York, the Hudson Valley, which is also connected to the sea via that long river, which comes out in the city of New York and around that area, and then goes all the way up to Albany. So an immensely long terroir, but very distinct wine. Some fabulous Cabernet Francs, for example, coming from the Hudson Valley. Really, really beautiful wines. Fjord is one of the producers.
Fjord?
Fjord, yeah. Fjord, Fjord. Like fjord.
They're like the fjords from the Scandinavia.
I think it's the fjord is the idea.
Okay.
But they're wines, and there's others. And then if we go, let's say, way over, forget the Finger Lakes for a minute.
Yeah, of course.
Over to Lake Erie, there's a whole stretch of terroir which is very differently influenced by a more shallow lake, different weather conditions. I mean, if the interesting parts of the world, and New York is certainly there, have these very specific locations where something interesting can happen. And you often find old agriculture there.
You said that interesting things were happening. What's interesting in wine?
In terms of the actual sort of beverage, to me, it's the authentic expression of what is capable of being produced by those grapes in that place. The authentic. So it's not coming from a laboratory. It's not coming from a bag of sugar or from.
Of course, it's not manufactured.
It's something from the place.
No makeup.
It's brought alive, and that is irreplaceable. And you see the same thing all over the world. You've mentioned several places.
Of course.
And so in the Finger Lakes, we started with a little bit of this Fox Run 23 dry Riesling, and I've been thinking about this wine ever since it went into my glass. Now, maybe 45 minutes ago. And I'm going, okay, why am I so interested in this wine?
Let's get into this wine. Bob, the Fox Run Riesling, and much more than speaking about Fox Run Vineyards and Scott and his team here. Why is Riesling so fantastic here? Why does, and I've had Rieslings from Mosel, the Rhine, from Alsace, from Tasmania, from New Zealand, from Chile. But Riesling, for me, it has to have aromatics, acidity, and has to have a story. Has to have some story. I don't know whether it's a story of war or whether it's a story of survival, but it's an anti-commercial story. Because Chardonnay and Sauvignon Blanc always have had crowds of people vouching for them. But Riesling, for me, is a survivor of sorts. What's the story?
That's true. Yeah,
What's the story of Riesling?
It is a survivor of sorts. It's funny because when I came to the Finger Lakes, say mid-90s, and I ran around tasting everywhere I could, and I did that for years. I did that as a wine producer. What I said to myself was, may not be the style I like, but all these Rieslings that I'm tasting are pretty good. I'm not so convinced. I mean, I think things have changed. Maybe in the mid '90s, but it almost didn't matter where I went. The Rieslings were identifiable. They were clear. They were cogent. You could sort of understand them. There was a clarity about them. And I think over the years, there's many people who have looked at, why Riesling? And I suppose you could distill it down in a simple way, which is very complex, which is the chemistry of the grape and the survivability and the growing of the grape works well in the Finger Lakes. Our location, generally speaking, in this place south of Lake Ontario, a little bit to the west and south of Lake Erie and so forth, gives us the opportunity. Our glaciated soils, we have these deep freshwater lakes. You've got this crazy set of circumstances that doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. So our version of Riesling has its properties. It's clearly not the same as Mosel, Pfalz, Rheingau, anything coming out of Austria or Alsace, right?
Pfalz, yeah.
So we get this particular expression of Riesling with a certain density. This wine, to me, has a certain texture, which I think is wonderful because it's got spice and it's got these citrus elements. It's got these.
It has
freshness.
Salt. It has a sensation, a salinity sensation. This capacity. This is my wife's favorite grape as well. To move from the accordion of palates and styles, not only from the dry to the late harvest and sweet and ice wine, but also you have in one wine the capacity to have grapefruit, citrus, acidic notes, and honey, white honey, late harvest tangerine notes, and everything comes together in a acidic citrus, a steely, very aromatic structure or spine. And to me, it's the perfect variety to pair with food.
It's unadorned.
Yeah,
Mostly,
without makeup,
right.
Exactly. It's natural beauty.
You don't typically do things to Riesling other than let it be itself.
Yeah, get out of the way.
And there's a little bit of playing in the corners. There's no question about it. But the marvelous thing about Riesling is that transparency. It is as able as Pinot Noir in the right circumstance to tell you about where it comes from. It's for no accident in Germany now. These are the two popular pairings, Pinot Noir, right, from Germany, and Riesling.
Everybody in Puerto Rico told me that I had to connect with the Wine and Grape Foundation of New York. What is it that you guys do? What's the mission? What's the vision? And how did you end up there?
The New York Wine and Grape Foundation is the agency that has the mandate to market, in effect, to represent the growers, the winemakers, and essentially the consumers involved in the state's a main agricultural product from New York State, and that is what wine and grapes are. So the New York Wine and Grape Foundation's mandate is to be interested in the welfare and promote the visibility and the success of the grape growers and the winemakers to the benefit of the consumers of New York State.
What have you found in the past couple of years since you started in your position? Because there's a lot of competition, not only within the United States, but also from other parts of the world. Main challenges, pros and cons, if you will, maybe in like 30 seconds of being part of this entity.
The most significant challenge is the fact that New York, and New York City in particular, while being one of the biggest markets for wines, is one of the biggest international markets for wines. So you know that song, if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. Yeah. Boy, if you can do that in the wine business, that is really true, because it's a tough market. Everybody in New York City can buy so much wine. Why should they buy Finger Lakes wine? So we have to be very good at what we do to sell our wines in New York City. It doesn't matter where in New York they're from. And so one of the things that we're very busy engaged in now, particularly, is connecting more consumers in New York State, particularly, with the wine producers in New York State.
Well, a lot of people say out there, New York City, the capital of the world, they have it everything. Wall Street, it's the center of the universe, New York City. Why give them the wines? Why buy their wines? What makes them different? And I am not part of that choir. I am part of the those who say try them, they're fantastic. In a nutshell, maybe if you can in 30 seconds, that's asking for a lot. But in terms of red, whites, and the climate of New York, why do you think people should give New York wines a break? Why?
There's one there's one way of saying this in a sort of a technocratic way, is that the perceived value of what we offer is superb. The value in the bottle for the price that's being
Price
charged
quality ratio, yeah.
is phenomenal. And you know, and I know that sadly our colleagues in other parts of the United States are struggling
Yeah.
because they can't state that with clarity to the consumers, the people interested in wine. And the other part of this is, Eduardo, there's something behind it. There's some personality. It isn't just a technical ratio of the extract in the bottle to the price. You have personality, you've got place, you can see it. There's an expression, there's something there. It's not simply a logo, a slogan. There's a genuine, you're going to meet the people who produce the wines. It's not a corporation with 5,000 employees.
But there's also a nakedness to the wine. I mean, with Riesling, with Lemberger, with the things that I've tasted today, you have this, and this is an attorney word, but you have this chain of custody. You can see and you can feel the hand of the guy who owns the grapes to the finished product in the bottle. And I don't want to badmouth California. I love California. I love the whole of the United States. But if California is worldwide known and it's very commercial and highly accoladed and highly rated region, it's very tradable, and you have wines that are there in the blue chip and the Wall Street and the market and whatnot. Nothing wrong with that, but there's this authenticity in these New York wines, at least from what I've experienced, that you feel this vulnerability, you feel this nakedness, you feel that the grape is expressing itself in its purest form, and it doesn't just necessarily boil down to price, but it is also felt in style and quality. I've been doing this for a number of years, and I never feel when I drink a New York wine that this wine is meant to please me. I feel that the wine is for me to discover it, for me to understand it, and for me to make a choice of whether I like it or not. Because life, at the end of the day, is all about choices. And you choose whether you like it or you don't. So there's a nakedness. There's this sense of, even if New York is the most important, New York City, at least the most important city in the world, and it doesn't need any accolades. It doesn't need any branding, because there's no other place in the world in terms of branding like New York City. New York wines are very vulnerable. Would you share in that?
We're a very small drop in the big ocean of wine. Very small drop. New York production, just in its entirety. And until recently, there has not been much of a unified approach and theme to approaching the market in a systematic way. So little growers, which is what most of the producers in New York are, they're, by any measure in the world, they're very small producers. How are they going to compete in this gigantic grocery store of wine world? It's very difficult. So the messages have to be tailored, they have to be correct, they have to be able to be invested in. And part of the trick of wine isn't just the business of making it one's passion. There's the business of making it a business. There is that, right? You have to be successful. At the
Yeah,
end of the day, you have to make money.
the problem at the end of the day is that this is a business.
It is a business.
Business has such a bad rap attached to it.
In this case, what we're talking about, for example, are people like John Martini over at Anthony Road, who for, I don't know, 25 or 30 years went every weekend down to the green market himself to sell his wines on the green market. So, but that's what we're talking about, is that sort of commitment to success, because they know they have to do that.
Before we wrap up, because we're going for dinner, I want to touch on Lemberger. This to me, Bob, and I am crazy about crunchy, red, citrusy, nuanced, low alcohol, low intervention, no makeup, acidic gastronomic wines. Lemberger is something that needs to be seen beyond New York. This for lovers of Gamay, Mencia, Bonarda Chica in Argentina, Barbera, Dolcetto di Alba in the Piedmont. Tell me a little bit about the entity where you serve at, where you work at,
Okay.
the New York Wine and Grape Foundation.
My role there is I have two roles, one of which is I'm a member of the board. So I have some fiduciary responsibility for the conduct of the foundation, which I share with all the board members, obviously. And also I'm the chair of the promotions committee, which is the probably, well, it's one of the most important committees of the foundation, simply because it's where the rubber hits the road in terms of representing the values of the wines and the growers and the producers. And the foundation was created to essentially look after their welfare as best we can.
When was it created?
Oh gosh, 70. I can't remember when the Wine and Grape Foundation was created, through the New York Farm Winery Act. People in the growing and production business needed an enormous amount more freedom than they had business-wise. And as a result of the Farm Winery Act, individual growers could establish winery businesses affordably. But at that point in time, the licensing and all the bureaucracy around it were almost impossible.
Okay.
And so the foundation comes on the scene, and immediately you've got relief, because some of the growers that were basically being left by the side of the road by virtue of California large companies no longer needing the grapes from this part of the world, but supplying themselves through California, had nothing to do with their grapes. So this organization essentially was created by government to deal with this problem in some way by enabling private enterprise. And on the board, we have people who represent restaurant interests, distributor interests, producer interests. It's an amalgam of the industry.
What's the story? How do you differentiate yourselves within the U.S.? Because the world of wine is 10 countries: Italy, France, Spain, Argentina, Chile, Australia. You have some people who are into New Zealand, Austria, the US. But how do you make a dent? How do you try to, is it internal? How do you compare it internally? How do you branch out and compete with the rest of the world? If you like strategy wise.
Yeah, we have the same strategy that the rest of the world is, and namely articulate your authentic values.
Okay.
Don't go off on a limb somewhere that you don't belong. So in our case, we have several American viticulture areas, which are those areas which have some characteristic which makes them identifiable consistently. And we essentially bring the message to the buyers, both at the retail, restaurant, and consumer end, about the values of these American viticulture areas and the style and the character of the wine that originates from these AVAs, American Viticulture Area. And it's exactly what you would do if you were German, or if you were Spanish, or you were from Argentina. You'd say, "Oh, so these are my wines, and this is why you should be interested in them." So we are the organization that is putting together this message, and has put together this message, and is starting to deliver it. The history of the marketing side, the sales side, domestically, is that for the most part, it was left up to the individual producers. So, and the foundation did many good things in terms of dealing with challenges to the industry in New York State. But a lot of our activity used to be focused overseas. And the message that Americans heard was coming from the likes of Decanter, for example.
Yeah. The magazine.
The magazine.
Oh, yeah, I know.
And so we have
Amanda Barnes, Andrew Jefford.
Yeah,
I know that.
we have very rich programs to deal with media.
These are fantastic wines. Seek out the Fox Run Vineyard wines. Tomorrow we're going to be at Anthony Road, Dr. Frank, and later on at Hillock and Hobbs. I think I have something with Herman Weimer, and other wineries. And I hope this is the first of many, because Puerto Rico and New York were brothers. It's only 3.5 hours away in a plane ride. So para los que me están escuchando en Puerto Rico y otras partes del mundo que tienen relaciones con Nueva York, sobre todo mis queridos hermanos en la República Dominicana, en Ecuador, en Nueva York, en España, perdón, el estado de Nueva York, que tenemos gran hermandad, gran reciprocidad de cultura, grandes afectos. Vengan a probar los vinos de los Finger Lakes, son maravillosos. Acabo de tener una conversación fantástica con un miembro que está en la junta de la Asociación de las Uvas y los Viñedos del Estado de Nueva York. Gracias por escuchar. Recuerden suscribirse a nuestro canal, darle al botoncito de follow y, por supuesto, estar en contacto con nosotros. Thank you, Bob. Thank you so much for your time.
Cheers.
Un abrazo. Será hasta la próxima, mi gente. Recuerden que en el mundo del vino lo importante no es el destino, la meta, sino el viaje o el recorrido. Será hasta la próxima.
Este fue el episodio de hoy. Recuerda dejarnos una reseña para que nos ayudes a crecer, suscribirte y recomendarnos con tus amigos amantes del vino. No importa cuán avanzado estés en el recorrido de enamorarte de aquello que decían sobre el vino. Son uvas transformadas en poesía. Aquí hay espacio para todos. Salud y, como siempre, dale share.